There's been such a huge sense of cognitive dissonance for me because I work with people all over the world. And I have to say, I don't think we fully appreciated just how good we've had it here in Aotearoa, New Zealand for the past year and a bit. I was on a call a couple months ago with a colleague in New York, a colleague in France, a colleague in Germany, and one in Canada, all of us on this Zoom call. And we get on the call and I'm like, how's everybody going? And the France one's like, we've just shut down again. And the German one's like, we're closed until June. This was like in January. And the Canada one was like, our hospitals are completely overrun. And they're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, we're fine. I mean, it's almost embarrassing, but really, I think we don't realize just how much we have to appreciate and how good we've had it here. So New York is back. Yes. In New York, a big part of the reason we've had it good here is because New York never really went away because it's New York and we're fucking impossible to shut up and keep a lid on. But yeah, they are doing pretty well. So, quick question. So I had the great privilege of addressing y'all 4 years ago, the 2017 conference. So quick show of hands, anyone who heard me present 4 years ago at the 2017 conference? Okay, a few of you, awesome. Quick show of hands, anyone who was in Otautahi Christchurch last week for the Etipu Agri Summit? Okay, a couple of people, awesome. So here's what we're gonna do. First, we gotta get everybody back up to speed. So those of you who heard me 4 years ago, those of you who are here, I wanna do a little kind of overview, skim through of the core premise of exponentials. And this might be a refresher if you heard me 4 years ago. I do have a bunch of new material in here. And then I want to touch on the four themes that really came out of last week that I think are so important for you to understand and appreciate. And so the first thing, what I want to do is I want to back right up and start with one of the absolute key insights coming out of the work that I've done for the past 6+ years now. And this insight comes from this guy. Starts with this guy. This is Gordon Moore. He's one of the co-founders of Intel Corporation. And in 1965, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 months as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we can see. This became known as Moore's Law. You may have heard of it. So the first insight that I want to share with you, and just so you know, this talk does not require any prior education in technology. It doesn't require any computer coding experience. It will all become clear. I promise you. Thank you for trusting me in advance and sticking with me through this bit of it. So doubling of transistors on an integrated circuit. The first insight I want to share comes from this guy. This is Ray Kurzweil. And what Ray Kurzweil said was, hang on a minute. What if you've got it wrong, Gordon Moore? What if the interesting thing here is not about how many transistors we can fit on an integrated circuit? What if it's actually not about the transistors at all? What if we zoom out and we say, instead of looking at the number of transistors we can fit on a circuit, like the mechanics of it, we look instead at what we might call the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Price performance, right? So fun fact, if you have heard of Moore's Law, fun fact you may not be aware of is that Gordon Moore made his famous prediction based on a data set of 4. He had 4 data points. But when Kurzweil zoomed out on this and he looked at the price performance of computing, what he saw is that that number has been doubling for almost 120 years, starting way back with the beginning of computing with electromechanical punch cards, moving on to relays and then vacuum tubes and then transistors and only then integrated circuits. Moore's Law is actually the 5th iteration of this underlying doubling in price performance, not the first. Kurzweil called this the law of accelerating returns. That's insight number 1. It's not about the transistors. It's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2 is that when we start to explore exponential trajectories, what happens with them is that they move slowly and then suddenly. Slowly and then suddenly. So 3 critical characteristics of exponential growth that are actually imperative for everyone to understand, I believe, regardless of what industry you're in or what your role is. The first one is that they look flat for a really long time. That's the slowly bit. That's where your technology is going from 0.01 to 0.02 to 0.04 to 0.08. Like, it's doubling, but it's still nothing, right? Looks flat for a really long time. And because it looks flat for a really long time, our brains are totally not wired for it. We evolved on the savannah chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in a predictable, linear fashion. We evolved to understand that a lion could run from that end of the room to that end of the room. Not that a lion could run from that end of the room to the moon. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear, no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself twice said that Moore's law was over. Both times proven wrong. Like, since I first started doing this work 6 years ago, I've had so many people say, oh, Moore's law, no, that's over. It's still going. I just read an article today about the next iterations of it, right? The guy who invented the law can't get his own law right. So I don't know what hope the rest of us have. But here is the thing to understand about an exponential curve. 30 linear steps, and we're back out at afternoon tea. But 30 doubling steps, and we're 26 times around the planet. And the tricky thing here is that you're not halfway until the 29th step. So it's really hard to measure progress as you go. I don't think there is a single person in this room, myself included, who could correctly guess where we would be at step 15 of this process. Our brains do not work this way. And so when we see doubling curves in action, we have to be systematic and disciplined in our assessment and our analysis of them if we want to have a hope of being able to respond effectively. All right. I want to tell you a story to really drive home just how hard it is for us to get our heads around this stuff. This is an apocryphal story, almost certainly not true. Who cares? Never let the facts get in the way of a good story. This is a story about the inventor of chess. The inventor of chess, back in the day, comes up with the game of chess, goes to the king, and he says, "Sire, I have invented this game. I wish to gift it to you for the good of the kingdom." And the king says, "This is a wonderful thing indeed that you have wrought. I should like to reward you. How would you like to be compensated?" And the inventor says, "I am but a simple man, sire. I ask for not much. Merely a single grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, and 2 on the second, and 4 on the third, and 8 on the fourth, and so on, until such time that the board should be full." And the king thought to himself, "This man is very clever with games, but he knows not how to value his work." And he readily agreed to the inventor's request. Well, you can imagine where this is going, right? By the time they reach the 64th square of the chessboard, the king would have owed the inventor 18 quintillion grains of wheat. Put all together, those grains of wheat would add up to something along the order of 1.2 trillion metric tons. To put this in some kind of context, the entire global output of wheat for all of 2017 was 753 million metric tons. So 1,600 times the entire global output of wheat for all of 2017. That's what the king would have owed the inventor. If you took those grains of wheat and lay them end to end, you would reach Alpha Centauri and back. And the thing that I want to drive home here is not that it's a big number, because you knew it was going to be a huge number, right? Like, that's not the punchline. The thing I want to drive home here is just how difficult it is for us to get our heads around the trajectory, how difficult it is for us to measure progress as we go. So we're going to play a game. And here's how this game is going to work. So we're all on board. We get to square 64 of the chessboard, and we are at 1.2 trillion metric tons, roughly. What I'm going to do is, in just a second, I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I'm going to start counting down. Not by 1. I'll count by bigger number. I'm going to start counting down from 1.2 trillion. And when I pass where you think we're going to be when we're halfway, I want you to sit down, right? So the 64th square, we're at 1.2 trillion metric tons. When I get past where we're going to be at the 32nd square, that's when I want you to sit down. Okay, everybody stand up, stand up. Come on, come on. It's been a long 2 days. Stand up, stand up. Okay, so I'm going to start counting down, counting down. You sit when you can sit down when you need a break, but if you want to play, you got to sit down when you think it's legit, right? Okay, so 1.2 trillion metric tons, we're on square 64. Where do we think we're going to be when we are on the 32nd square? Who thinks half of 1.2 trillion is 600 billion? Who thinks it's 600 billion? Good, you're all paying attention. Okay, no, you can sit down if you like. Okay, go for it. Sounds good. All right, so it's not 600 billion. Who thinks that we're going to reduce that by an order of magnitude? Let's say 600 million, reduce it by an order of 1,000. 600 million? No. 300 million. 250 million. 100 million. 50 million. 25 million. 15 million. 10 million. 5 million. 2.5 million. 1 million. 750,000. 500,000. 250,000. 150,000. 100,000. 75,000. 50,000. 25,000. The actual number is 279. It is so hard. I'll tell you, I have played this trick on so many people and no one ever gets close. It is so hard for us to get our heads around this stuff slowly and then suddenly. Nothing, 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 and then everything seemingly overnight. And all of the incumbents are like, it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. Right? The reason when I learned about this stuff, the reason that I shifted the entire trajectory of my career to helping more people understand this is because I don't want anyone left saying it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. All right. I mean, that story is most likely apocryphal. I'm going to tell you a real world story to drive this point home. So you might have seen this headline, maybe, maybe not, who knows, 2016, an artificially intelligent Go player. This is the game of Go. Go, one of the most complex games we've ever invented, many orders of magnitude more complex than the game of chess. The total number of possible moves in Go, orders of magnitude greater than the number of atoms in the universe. Okay, reasonably complex game. 2016, a company called DeepMind comes out with an artificially intelligent Go player. It's called AlphaGo. And AlphaGo, in March of 2016, beat Lee Sedol, the then world champion at the game of Go. This was an extraordinary achievement. It happened fully a decade before the researchers expected it to happen. Absolutely stunning. There's Lee Sedol realizing he's out of a job. Right, so this is March of 2016. A year later, DeepMind comes out with a new artificially intelligent Go player. It's called AlphaGo Zero. So the original AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4 games to 1. AlphaGo Zero beat AlphaGo 100 games to 0, which already is pretty amazing. But even more amazing is how they trained it. So typically, you want to train an artificial intelligence to do something, an AI to do something. What you do is you feed it lots of data. You feed it lots of data and you tell it this is what you're looking for and this is what you're not looking for. So let's say you want to train your AI to recognize pictures of cats. You feed it millions of pictures of cats and millions of pictures of not cats, and you tell it, these are cats, these are not cats. And it adjusts all that data, starts to process it, extrapolates patterns, and goes, okay, the pictures of cats, they all have ears like this. Okay, but maybe one of my ears got chewed off because I was in a fight. So they got eyes shaped like this, and whiskers, and a mouth like this. But maybe it's just me holding a cat mask. Okay, so they're also looking for a body like this, and a tail, whatever. So it starts to be able to identify these are cats, and then you feed it a new picture, and it takes all that information and goes, yep, cat, or nope, not cat, right? A little bit oversimplified, but broadly speaking, that is how it works. And with the original AlphaGo, that is exactly what they did. They fed it 40 million historic games of Go. They said, these are the winners, these are the losers. This is what you're looking for. And it processed, parsed all that data, started to extrapolate patterns, and was able to identify in any given situation, what is the best next move for me to make? But with AlphaGo Zero, they didn't feed it a single game. They gave it the rules, and they gave it the desired outcome. And they let it play itself. Starting with random play, literally any move will do. It played itself 4.9 million times, and within 3 days was the best Go player in the world. Slowly, and then suddenly, nothing, 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 and then everything. And I don't want anyone left saying it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. I was sitting over there earlier and I heard someone from the board talking about how nobody could have predicted that we would have closed all the restaurants, right? We all started to get real familiar with exponential curves a year and a bit ago, right? Or as this one that I love, time spent looking at exponential curves. Month of 2020. All right. So insight number 1, it's not just about the transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2, slowly and then suddenly. Insight number 3 is that this stuff does not only apply to computing. It applies to any technology once it becomes what we call information enabled. Think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate enabled, right? It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happened, it started to follow a doubling in price performance, much like computing. The first digital camera had a resolution of 0.01 megapixel, right? Slowly, then suddenly, 0.01, 0.02, 0.04, 0.08. It's never going to be good enough. My phone has a resolution of 40 megapixels. Right? Slowly and then suddenly. So let's take a look at some of the other technologies that are following this doubling phenomenon and see what they imply. This is one of my favorite all-time charts. This chart is called Welcome to the Terror Dome. This is not a terror chart for me. It's a very happy chart for me. It's a terror chart for the people who made it. That's the good folks at the CIA, the World Bank, the Energy Information Administration. And what we're mapping here is the price performance of energy by different fuel types. Okay, so on the y-axis, we've got the price per million BTUs. On the x-axis, we got the year. We're mapping 5 different fuel types. And what happens? Starting in 1949, 4 of those fuel types bump along. They bump along the bottom. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards. Those are our fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are linear technologies. And linear technologies, what linear technologies do in terms of price performance is this. They bump along, they go up and down, and over time, they gradually trend upwards. Everyone in this room will be familiar with this phenomenon from any kind of, general commodity market. Right? This is what happens with prices. They go up and down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards. What happens doesn't even come onto the chart until like 2007. And when it comes onto the chart, it's so expensive that all the incumbents are like, it's never going to be a thing. We never need to worry about this. And then the price plummets. That's solar. Solar is information-enabled energy, doubling in price performance much faster than Moore's Law. I want to show you what this is looking like. Solar costs just since 2010, like leapfrogging from the previous chart, just since 2010, costs have dropped by a factor of 5. Last year, we hit a new world record solar price, 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. To put this in context, in the US, coal-fired power comes in around 13 cents per kilowatt hour. It is now cheaper in certain parts of the world to build and operate a new solar plant than it is to maintain an existing coal plant. Think about that for a second. Cheaper to build and operate new than maintain existing. All of the sunk cost arguments go completely out the window, and all of a sudden the right thing to do for the planet aligns with the right thing to do for our bottom lines, and that is when we see transformative tipping point change. And if you don't believe me that we are seeing transformative tipping point change when it comes to solar, all you need to do is look at one of my favorite headlines of all time, which is this, that the Kentucky Coal Museum has now switched to solar. All right. So I just want to check in here. Does everyone understand this chart? Have I explained the phenomenon clearly? Anyone have any questions about what I'm trying to convey with this, the doubling in price performance and the general message that we've covered so far? We're all good with that? Okay, so I showed this chart to my friend Grant Ryan, who, in my opinion, is one of New Zealand's best inventors. And Grant said, you should do one of those for lab-grown meat. And I said, that's a great idea. And so we did. Y'all want to see it? No, definitely not. Tomatoes, get out. I'm going to show you anyway. All right, here we go. So we did this a few years ago. So this is exactly the same as the previous chart, right? It's the price performance of chicken and beef. No venison on here. On the y-axis, we've got the cost per kilogram. So exactly the same structure as the previous chart. Y-axis, we've got the cost per kilogram. X-axis, we've got the year. We can only find data going back to 1980. That's fine. It's enough to be statistically significant. The blue line is the beef. The orange line is the chicken. And what do these two lines do? They bump along. They bump along. They go up and down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards, right? Linear technologies are inflationary in nature. What happens? Beef hits a high of $9.87 in around 2014, came back down a bit off of that high. I'm sure we'd all agree, and there'll have been some fluctuations around COVID. Obviously, I'm sure we'd all agree that if we were to zoom out and project forward another 10, 20 years, we'd expect this to be, more expensive over time, right? Cost of living, just general inflation, right? Should we do it? Should we look at, yeah. All right, here we go. We don't have a lot of data points, I'll be clear. First of all, we've had to change the y-axis to a logarithmic axis. That means instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it now goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000. We had to do that because otherwise we wouldn't be able to fit the data on this chart. It would have to go to Saturn or something. Our first data point for a kilogram of lab-grown meat comes in at just under $2.3 million. Our second data point for a kilogram of lab-grown meat comes in at $40,000. Our third data point comes in at $80. $80 is still a lot of money for a kilogram of meat. Does anyone doubt that number is going to continue to come down? Price, performance, law of accelerating returns. I showed you this chart in 2017. As Sarah said, last week we ran at Tsipu, the Boma NZ Agri Summit in Ototahi Christchurch. We had a whole bunch of wonderful speakers. And what I want to do is kind of bring you up to date with what got covered there and it's sort of where I titled this talk Then, Now, Next, because we last met 4 years ago. We had some stuff, updates for what's going on now and some projections for where the puck is headed over the next wee while. But the first thing I want to do, before I touch on what happened last week, the first thing I want to do, I just literally added a slide just before I got on stage because I heard, I haven't been here a lot over the past 2 days, but I did stop in for a couple of the talks and I heard people talking about fencing and someone just in the previous session mentioning virtual fencing. And we had a speaker from Halter in 2019 at the first Agri Summit that we ran. Halter is a New Zealand company which is doing virtual fencing and a whole bunch of virtual fencing. They recognize they're. Oh my God, can I get it? Can I get it? Let me, where's the phone? Where is it? Give it to me. Give it to me. They can tell, all their messaging is towards cattle, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't use this for deer. They do virtual fencing. They can tell when the cows are on heat. Anyway, definitely worth checking out. And you can change the fences round when you want to. And you can move them from paddock to paddock and do whatever you like. So Halter, I think the website is halterhq.co.nz. Definitely worth having a look there. All right. So I mentioned we were going to have 3 insights and 4 themes. We've had the 3 insights. It's not about the transistors. It's about the price performance of computing, slowly then suddenly. And the third insight was it's not just about computing, right? It's about any information-enabled technology. We absolutely need to be paying attention to the trajectories when it comes to investment in alternative proteins. $3 billion in 2020 alone in alternative proteins, number one. Number two, 3% increase in market share between 2019 and 2020. Huge, 3% increase. Boston Consulting Group reckons that alt meat could represent 11% of the market by 2035. One thing I will say, when it comes to a projection like that, I will virtually guarantee you that it's bullshit. It's going to be way off. There's a decent chance it's way low. There's a decent chance that it happens much faster than BCG said. There is equally a chance it happens slower. If I were to take a bet right now, my bet would be that it's going to happen faster. My bet would be that it's going to happen faster because one of the things that I see is that and I might have a slide on this a little bit later on, but has anyone here familiar with the Gartner hype cycle? The Gartner hype cycle. So the Gartner hype cycle is this cycle that's like, we hear about something new, something bright and shiny, like artificial intelligence or whatever, and the hype goes crazy. We're all like, oh my gosh, it's going to change everything. And then it doesn't change everything. We're all like, well, that sucked. It didn't do anything of what it promised. And so it goes into this, they call it the trough of disillusionment. This is the peak of inflated expectations and then the trough of disillusionment. And then we go from the trough of disillusionment into the slope of enlightenment. And that's where the thing actually starts to get some market traction, but it's not like all the everything magic like we thought it was before. It's just like now it's actually being used in the market. What we're really starting to see here is a lot of these things going into the slope of enlightenment, where the distribution infrastructure is there, the market appetite's there, the companies have scaled. We've got companies now that have been in this market for, a decade that are starting to get meaningful exits, meaning selling the companies for, $1 billion plus. So they're really starting to be major legitimate entrants in this field, not just niche, like weirdos on the side. All right. The final stat that she shared is that self-identified meat eaters have gone down from 85% to 71% between 2019 and 2020. And again, take that as with the grain of salt of the first bullet point, right? Meat sales up by almost 20%, self-identified meat eaters going down. What's going on there? There may be some consumption guilt going on. There may be some people who call themselves now reducitarians or flexitarians. Who knows? What I am wanting to do is, again, empower you so you are not in a position of saying it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. These are trends we must understand if we want to be able to respond effectively. Obviously, huge market penetration now in terms of plant-based meats. The Impossible Foods last August did another raise of $200 million US, bringing the total capital they've raised to $1.5 billion total. From last year until now, they have gone from being in 150 grocery stores to 17,000 grocery stores. That is a 100-fold increase in a year. Slowly, then suddenly, nothing, and then everything. All right. That's the plant-based. The plant-based stuff is definitely ready for market prime time. What is not ready for market prime time, despite my earlier slide about the Terradome and the lab-grown meat? Lab-grown meat is not yet ready for prime time. Right? Lab-grown meat, the only two places you can possibly get it are Singapore and Israel. Doesn't have any kind of retail penetration. There's one restaurant that you can go to that's actually a lab. There's still kind of, in process. That being said, we did have a speaker at Itipu, Sandhya Sriram from Shiak Meats, which is doing lab-grown seafood out of Singapore, and they are looking to be available for retail purchase and consumption by 2022. They've been invested in by our good friend Amy Novogratz, who runs a venture capital fund called Aquaspark. And I know Amy really well. I've known her for at least a decade. Their fund only invests in companies that they think are close to market ready. And so again, the signals are that we are getting closer and closer and closer to those tipping points when we go, it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. All right. So that is, and just that reminder of that third insight, right? Slowly and then suddenly. The other thing that Louisa touched on as a really critical market trend to be aware of, certainly in terms of venture capital investment, and this is some great news for this room, is the idea of food as medicine. That is getting a huge amount of traction in terms of venture capital investment. And a stat that she shared, which will live in my head rent-free forever, is that 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. That means high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetes, or diabetes. 88%. I mean, it's not hugely surprising, but still, we're so cliche. Anyway, food is medicine. While I was up the back, I was reading a pamphlet about deer velvet and its impact on brain function. So go y'all. You've got a lot of opportunity here. All right. That's theme number one, is disruption. Theme number two, innovation. And what I want to share with you now is some of the tech innovations that came out of last week. So the first one, we had Alexei Rostopchov, who is head of JD Labs and head of sustainability at John Deere Global. Just funny side story. Like he's from John Deere Global, right? right? But he was there with us in Christchurch. The reason he was there with us in Christchurch is that he came to New Zealand like 61 weeks ago for a 2-week holiday and never left. So we got to have him in person, which was pretty awesome. But what he basically shared, John Deere has gone from being a tractor and equipment company to being a computer and technology company, right? That their whole focus now is how do they embed sensors, AI, image recognition, data, warehousing and management. They have GPS reference stations all over the world, including in Antarctica. They've got their own satellite network to capture data and track it. And what that allows them to do is run their equipment with literally like to the precision, their 10-ton equipment to the precision of $1 coins, right? They can run I forget what it's called, a big machine that plants seeds, a tractor. Is it a tractor? Is that the word? Thank you. I'm from New York. Okay, just side note, right? Like this is how New York, I grew up in New York City, right? And when you grow up in New York City, people are like, oh, New York City, if you can make it there, you make it anywhere. No. I thought growing up in New York, I was like, it's great because I can go anywhere and I'll feel confident. And then I got to New Zealand and I realized that I am just the most ignorant person on the planet. My friend Karen told me that my intelligence goes down in direct proportion to population density, and she's not wrong. I am not joking. I got here and I had never, I'm from New York. I had never hung clothes on a clothesline. I had never adjusted the heat in my home myself. It was always just warm. What do you mean you have to? And I moved here with my now ex-husband. Maybe this is why he's my now ex-husband, the story I'm about to tell you. I moved here with him and he's a Kiwi and we had a wood fire. And I would come home from work and I'd be freezing and I'd put a sweater on and I'd be still freezing. So I put another sweater on and another sweater. And then he'd come home and he'd go, why didn't you light the fire? And I'd be like, light the fire? What am I, fucking Girl Scout? I don't know how to light a fire. I am from New York City. So tractor's the word. Thank you. Got it. Yeah. So they're running these tractors and they're running these tractors in convoy now, right? Where the tractors are all talking to each other. They're running combines in convoy where one of them's doing the harvesting and it's throwing the stuff into the other one. Like they're basically going, how can we totally maximize efficiency? And the really interesting thing is that Alexi wears these dual hats, innovation and sustainability. And what they're finding is that these dual hats are 100% one and the same. That the more efficient they can be with their innovation, with the precision of their artificial intelligence, with how they prep the soil, how they plant, how they use herbicides. Like basically they're now using their equipment to be able to artificially use image recognition, the same way I talked about the cats, to identify weeds and just spot spray individual weeds rather than broadacre spraying a whole paddock. They can reduce herbicide use by 77%. Right? That is just an astonishing number. And of course, what happens when you reduce the use that much, the application that much, is not only do you save a whole heap of money, but you reduce resistance to your herbicides as well. So just benefits all over the show. All right, that was an awesome innovation. Jason Wargent from Biolumic, he is doing amazing things with plants, and basically they are what they're doing at Biolumic is they are programming plants with light. And what Jason talked about is that we often think about plants. The thing we were all taught in school is that plants receive light and it's like food to them, and they convert it through photosynthesis. Even in New York, they taught us this. We convert it through photosynthesis into plant matter, into chlorophyll. But what he's saying is that actually light isn't only food for plants, it is also programming. It's also instructions, tells them what to do. And so they've been able to use light recipes on both seeds and seedlings. And these are like one-off treatments, and then they put the plants out and just let them do what they're going to do. And what they're able to do is spur plant growth and increase resilience and reduce the need for pesticides, sometimes by up to 50%, just from these light treatments that they're giving the seeds and the seedlings. Really extraordinary stuff. Further innovation. Ian Yule, I think he's based in Palmerston North, I want to say, with Plant Tech. And basically what Ian is doing is using hyperspectral imaging. And again, all of these things are innovations that are coming directly because of the exponential progression in terms of computing and other digital technologies, right? So they're using hyperspectral imaging, which is basically, so anyone is I've got 3 stepsons. My oldest stepson is colorblind, and I just got him for his birthday this past February, a couple months ago. I got him some glasses that allow him. They're supposed to allow him to see color. I'll confess, I was hoping it was going to be a totally like viral internet moment that he would like put the glasses on and just start crying and be like, I can see you. It wasn't like that, but it was still pretty cool. He put the glasses on and we showed him pictures of like, you can go online and see these pictures of like watermelons, and they cut the picture in half, and one half shows what it looks like if you're colorblind. So it just looks like all green. And the other half shows what it looks like if you're not colorblind. So it's like green and red. And he would look at the picture without the glasses on. He'd be like, it's all the same. That's just one picture. And then he put the glasses on and be like, what? And then we did a test. You can do the colorblind tests online, which is super interesting to do, especially if you're colorblind and people do it with your friends. Like, it's really wild. The tests are, it's a circle with a bunch of dots, and the dots are different colors, and some of the dots will make numbers on there, right? And so you look at the dots and you try to see if it has numbers, and he would do those tests and he'd be like, no, there's definitely nothing there. And I'd be like, oh my, like the ones that he couldn't see were like bright pink on bright green, like super obvious to me, but not at all obvious to him. And he put the glasses on and he totally passed the test, and he goes, is this what everything looks like to you normally? Because of course, like if he's grown up his whole life seeing the world a certain way, when he put the glasses on, everything looked wrong, right? It looked broken. So hyperspectral imaging takes what happened with him, where he went from being able to see this much to being able to see this much. Hyperspectral imaging uses equipment to let us see this much. Right? And when we can see this much, we can see not only, me standing up here, but you can also see like minute variances in the color of my skin that'll tell you how fast my heart is beating or what my blood pressure is, right? You can see, and what Ian's done is he's taken hyperspectral imaging. What they do is they fly over properties. They do hyperspectral maps of the entire property. They bring it back and they go every per square meter. Here is the fertility of the soil. And what we're going to do is we're going to generate a plan for how we're going to fertilize this entire property square meter by square meter. They plug that plan into the remote controller of the hopper on the plane. They then fly over the property. The hopper opens and closes automatically based on where exactly the plane is. So they're tracking the plane. So now all of a sudden, instead of having to go, we're just going to like dump fertilizer randomly all over a hilly property. They can do this very precisely, and again, within kind of a second, to be able to open and close the hopper to avoid waterways, to reduce usage, all wonderful things. So that's what Ian is up to. Third theme that came out of last week's event. What's that?
On our farm, we've already done it.
Oh yeah.
We did proof of concept on it.
Did you, for Ian's thing? Yeah. Oh, cool. And good. Thumbs up.
Oh, I've got a lot of nice maps with colours on them.
Did you use, it worked. Thank you. Don't leave me hanging like that. It's terrible. I just got maps with colors. Oh, by the way, it worked really well. Right, okay.
Well, Ravenstown took it.
Yeah.
Walcott.
Completely, right? So he did that with Massey and Ravensdown.
That's right.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So this is the kind of thing now that we're seeing coming online. And like I said before, that we're starting to go past that, peak of inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, and into applications that you can now secure and apply and use on farm. Third theme that came through last week, transformation. And one of the really interesting things is a lot of the conversation about climate change and climate mitigation didn't come down hugely to technology, despite what I just said about Alexei Rostopchinov and the innovation and tech piece and sustainability piece going together. So one of the big things that came out last week was from Steve Meller, CH4 Global, who was talking about Asparagopsis seaweed. If you're not across Asparagopsis seaweed, I would definitely be looking into this. He was talking about cattle, but ruminants. Is this a thing? Did you talk about this already? No. Is this? No. Yeah, you're excited about this though. No. No. Okay. Curious as to know why? Not right now. Sorry. I got the mic, so we can talk about it after. So his research and other research I've read, although you may have different research, and the research may be different for deer, I'm not sure. But he's looking at cattle, and their research is showing that it cuts methane production by up to 90 to 95%, a 0.5% diet of Asparagopsis interferes with methane production 90 to 95%. check in with Innes to see why that's not going to work for you in any way. I'm not sure. Why not?
It does.
Okay.
It's constantly being applied.
Yeah.
So it works in a feedlot situation.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for pastoral species.
Yeah. So he's got some answers for that. So we're gonna all these talks, by the way, are getting uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you can watch them all. And one of the questions was literally that, and he has an answer for it, and I don't remember what that answer is off the top of my head, but I think there's something about. Anyway, I'm not gonna guess. But anyway, so.
A remark here. About 20% of the global methane emissions come from cattle. 80% comes from fossil fuel.
Sure.
And other sources.
Yeah.
So there's still 80% there once you got rid of the 95%.
So basically the numbers that Steve shared are that if we meet all of our targets that we set in Paris, we are still 13 gigatons of carbon equivalent emissions short of keeping ourselves to a 2-degree rise in temperature. Now, let's be clear. First of all, there is no silver bullet when it comes to climate, right? It's a wicked problem. It's huge and complex. Definitely everyone needs to be doing their part. We are not on track to meet our targets under Paris. Nobody's on track to meet our targets under Paris. And 2 degrees is still a pretty shitty outcome, to be totally clear. However, what he's looking at is going, okay, if we do meet all of them, we're 13 gigatons short. If we reduce the methane emissions from cattle, that gives us 12.9 gigatons. So it's a huge lever that we have to pull. So that was Steve's talk. Definitely worth watching. We had a bunch of people talking about regenerative agriculture. So this is Dave Maslin from NZ Merino. They've come out with they created ZQ a while ago. They just recently come out with ZQRX. ZQRX is a platform for how farmers can track their regenerative journey. And it's not one of the things he was really clear about is that it's not an audit process and it's not a tick box exercise. It's not a like, you've done all the things and now you're certified. Yay. It's basically, I was here for the talk about health and safety before, and that it's not like you have no accidents, now you're safe. That safety is like the way of behaving rather than the kind of end state. And what Dave and the New Zealand Merino Company folks are doing is similar when it comes to regenerative ag. They have launched this with a whole bunch of sheep farmers. They've gotten fantastic uptake, actually. He said he was pretty nervous to launch it. And, it's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking for, like, a New Yorker to get up in front of a bunch of, like, actual farmers and say, and here's what this person said about regenerative. I don't know if you're going to, kick me out of the room. But they launched it to a whole bunch of sheep farmers, and they got huge uptake. It was like 200 people they launched it to, and they got 171 farms signed up to it already. They are looking to expand this beyond sheep and beyond New Zealand. So both to additional industries, including potentially yours, as well as outside of the country. Well worth paying attention to that. Super interesting when it comes to regenerative ag. We had a few different folks talking about this stuff, where there are a lot of conversations about, oh, you should do this, and here's the Hewaka Ekinoa, and here's the new requirements that are coming down, and a lot of like kind of beating up on farmers and more obligations and more things you have to be doing and more things you have to be spending money on. One of the really great things that came out of last week was how many people were talking about how we're going to fund things and how we're going to make it so that all these things are not only possible, but more desirable than not. So, for example, we had the wonderful Mike Taitoko from Calm the Farm, and what he is doing is securing investors and bankers working together with being able to map data that you're already tracking, data coming off of farms, so that you can then and working with suppliers as well, like insurers, so that you can then access loans at more favorable rates if your data is tracking to sustainability targets, so that you can access insurance at more favorable rates, again, based on the data that you're mapping to. We had Donna Muir and Prem Maan, Donna from head of Natural Capital at BNZ, and Prem Maan, who's the chair of Southern Pastures, which is Lewis Road Creamery. They were talking about the $50 million sustainability-linked loan that they've just done. So a lot of folks looking at, okay, yeah, all well and good to just say, how come you're not putting up more fences around your waterways, right? But understanding, actually, if we want you to put up more fences fences around your waterways, or if you want to put up more fences around your waterways, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. It has to be financially viable. Otherwise, why would you do it? Right? Like it's just totally ridiculous to expect people to do things that's going to put them out of business. So that was something that was really exciting. Mike basically has been following this a long time, and he was like, globally, regen is a freight train that has left the station. There's no, we can argue about, one of the key points he made was that we can argue about whether you think it's a good idea or not, but because it's left the station, it doesn't really matter if you don't think it's a good idea. It's going to be that kind of conversation. Same with the climate conversation. It doesn't matter if you think that, climate is not something we need to be responding to. That is what the market is going to be demanding. And the fourth and final theme, I think I'm almost out of time here, is inspiration. And one of the really fascinating things is that we talk about tech all we want. We can talk about money all we want. And ultimately what it comes down to is people, who we are, what we care about, what we stand for, where we want to go, who we want to be, what kind of a world we want to build. And so Jeff Ross, who started 42 Below Vodka, but who has now invested in Lake Howea Station, he basically laid down the challenge. What if instead of defending the problem, we attack the opportunity? He said Lake Howea Station is the biggest investment they've made by far, and they're looking to invest in more farms because they see this as one of the biggest opportunities imaginable. That the thing that has driven his business success with 42 Below and Ecoya and the restaurant groups and all the other things he's been invested in is global tailwinds. And climate change is the biggest global tailwind that has happened in our lifetime. And we have a huge opportunity here in New Zealand to build brand New Zealand and get out in front of it. This is a bit of a side note, but this is one of your local sons, anyone who's from Invercargill here, Tangaloa Walker from Farm for Life, who's basically going, how do we make sure we got more young people coming into the sector? How do we make sure we've got succession being looked at, that we're training people? He's just a fantastic dude and doesn't really fit with my whole narrative, but he's so awesome that I wanted to just share him with you anyway. Check out Farm for Life. They have thousands of videos up there, teaching that you can pull up exactly what you need. How do I build this fence? How do I get move the deer from here to there? How do I do whatever? He's just a super awesome guy. All right. Lindy Nelson from Agri Women's Development Trust, she basically gave a talk that the importance of understanding belonging. And I will tell you, Sarah mentioned that I trained with Brene Brown to facilitate, to help people understand and grow courage as a core competency. I've been working with people in the tech innovation disruption space for a long time. Where those conversations fall over is not the tech innovation disruption. It's because we have not dealt with each other as human beings. We haven't dealt with our fears. We haven't dealt with our feelings. We haven't dealt with our aspirations. We haven't dealt with our need to belong, our need to understand each other. And Lindy spoke really beautifully to that. And then we also, second to last one, Paul Pullman, the former chief executive of Unilever. I had an almost hour-long conversation with him, which I strongly recommend listening to. It's mostly him. He is so fascinating. And he said, Bill Gates wrote this book 10 years ago where he talked about technological solutions to climate change. But we've got, hundreds of thousands of kids dying every year from diarrhea that you can cure with a piece of bar soap. He said, we don't have an innovation dilemma. We have a moral dilemma. And I would argue the same is true when it comes to our response to climate change. Like, we know what the challenge is. We don't have an innovation dilemma. We have a moral dilemma. And the moral dilemma may not be yours. The moral dilemma may be where our government is investing money, or how banks are valuing certain investments, or how investors are valuing, or what the market is valuing, right? We have a collective moral dilemma, not a collective innovation dilemma. And our final speaker that I will close on is the wonderful Sir Ian Taylor, Dunedin boy, who basically just said that all of it needs to come back to our why. That the technology exists, we just have to agree on our why, and this Waka Aotearoa will be a leader in the world. That is what I want to close on, this kind of what came through so clearly from speaker after speaker, and they were chosen for a reason for this event, but honestly, they are all like legitimate, credible folks. What came through so clearly is what they see is hope and opportunity. Hope and opportunity, and that is what I want to leave you on. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. I think I'm out of time, eh? No time for questions? No, I'm out of time. Yeah. Yeah?
If there's any questions for Kaila. Sorry. Can I just state by saying I actually did a quick Google, and Paul Perman's video is on the Etepu, but the Boma YouTube. So I'm definitely going to go back and watch that one as well.
Hi, Kaila. Kaila, really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. Petri dish experiments with biological systems show that exponential increases like we've seen in your presentation inevitably end in a pretty sticky collapse. If you expand that to the human population, what does your exponential theme have in store for us?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a really, and this is such a good point that you raise, and a really substantive difference between substrate-enabled technologies, which I would argue biological systems are substrate-enabled technologies, right? Like just like photography, film photography is dependent on the physical film, creating additional humans dependent on physical humans to create more humans. Substrate-enabled technologies versus information-enabled technologies. And the main difference and the reason why information-enabled technologies kind of keep taking us off guard is because we know in biological systems that we rapidly hit a ceiling and it all turns to custard, right? But with information-enabled technologies, what happens is every time we max out on a particular technology, another technology comes along to continue the underlying trend. The trend is not, if the trend were only the physical transistors, Moore's law will be over at some point. But what happens is another trend will come along, another kind of technology to continue the price performance thing, which is it's almost it's an abstraction of the idea, right? So the next one that's looking to come down the pike is quantum computing, right? Quantum computing, it's not transistors on a chip. It's something totally different, but it will continue that underlying trend, doubling of price performance. Human populations are looking to level out, not for a little while. I think 9 or 10 billion is the number that I've heard tossed around. If we want to reduce the human population, the number one thing we can do is educate women, and particularly educate women in developing countries. That is Steve said, the biggest lever that we have for climate change is asparagopsis in cattle. The biggest lever that we have for reducing the growth of human population is educating women in developing countries.